Before every voyage eastward, Norse sailors had a prayer. Let there be no storm, let there be no fire, but above all, let there be no Bjarmians. Storms could be survived, fires could be escaped, but the Bjarmians, they were whispered about in the cold shadows of northern fires, in hushed voices and with fearful eyes. Even the bravest Vikings rarely spoke their name aloud, because to face them was to disappear into the forest and never come back. But who were these mysterious people that the Viking warriors, conquerors of half of Europe, feared? To answer that, we must journey into the frozen north, to the wild, bitter land between northern Finland and the Kola Peninsula of what is now Russia. This was no ordinary terrain. This was a realm of deep forests, snow-drenched valleys, and unending cold. And hidden within it lived a tribe known as the Bjarmians, the forgotten people who refused to be conquered, the ghost warriors of the north. The Bjarmians were not many in number. They didn't build empires or cities, but what they lacked in size they made up for in silence, strategy, and absolute terror. Norse sagas and Eastern chronicles alike tell of a people who fought with ghost-like precision. They didn't march into open battle. They struck from the shadows, quick, quiet, and merciless. Their favorite time to attack? Nightfall. Their favorite terrain? Forests so dense that not even moonlight could cut through. In 995, they executed one of their most infamous tactics, something still known in legends as the fire sleep. According to survivors, the Bjarmians lured Viking troops into a seemingly abandoned snowy valley. What the Vikings didn't know was that oil-filled pits had been dug under the snow. When the invaders gathered, the Bjarmians ignited the traps. The snow erupted in flames. Walls of fire surrounded the Vikings. Panic ensued. Those who tried to flee were picked off by silent archers hidden in the trees. Half of them never returned, a saga grimly recalls. Masters of the frozen land. These weren't just raiders or lucky survivors. The Bjarmians were engineered for war in their own brutal climate. Their weapons, devastatingly effective. Their arrows were feathered with a special design that made them silent in flight, nearly impossible to detect until they struck. The arrowheads, made of light yet razor-sharp metal, could pierce Viking chainmail and thick furs alike. Their clothing, functional warfare gear. Their boots were fitted with retractable bone spikes that allowed them to move silently and swiftly over ice and snow. And their most astonishing innovation, asymmetrical skis. One short, wide ski for pushing, the other long and thin for gliding. With these, they could skim across deep snow at over 15 kilometers per hour while carrying weapons. Even their homes were built for survival and stealth. Half buried beneath the earth, their underground dwellings maintained a constant 15 degrees Celsius inside, even when it was minus 30 degrees Celsius outside. Fires were rare, smoke gave away location. Their settlements were hidden, their movements invisible. To outsiders, their lands were marked by standing stones engraved with wild beasts and strange symbols. Warnings, perhaps, or spells. The Vikings believed them to be markers of dark magic, and few dared cross their borders twice. The Viking defeat that history forgot. One of the clearest examples of the Bjarmians' terrifying power comes from 1026, when a Viking leader named Thor Hun led an expedition into their territory. He brought 300 warriors and 3 longships. His aim? Trade and tribute. At first, things seemed cordial. The Bjarmians appeared to welcome the talks. But when the Vikings tried to seize a sacred site, believed to be a burial ground or spiritual center, everything changed. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. The Bjarmians launched a sudden, perfectly timed ambush. Trees were cut down behind the Viking camp, blocking any escape. Arrows rained from the forests. Spike traps and falling logs separated Viking units from each other. It was chaos. When the survivors finally limped back, only one ship returned, so damaged, even children had to help steer it home. Near the White Sea, archaeologists later uncovered a mass grave of 40 Viking warriors, most with deep wounds to their backs. They had been ambushed while fleeing. No songs were sung of this defeat. No bards told tales. The silence says everything. The culture that frightened the Vikings more than death. But perhaps what frightened the Norse even more than Bjarmian weapons was their way of life. Unlike Viking society, which was largely patriarchal, the Bjarmians had no such boundaries. Women could and did hold power. They fought in battles. They ruled settlements. They were archers, warriors, and spiritual leaders. A Varangian observer once noted, "The women here shoot arrows as well as the men." Their burial customs were equally shocking. While Vikings burned their dead or buried them with weapons, the Bjarmians mummified theirs. Corpses were carefully preserved and arranged based on star maps. Entire cemeteries were built in alignment with the constellations. To the Norse, it was alien, unnatural. Some even believed it was proof of demonic influence. Their mysticism ran deep. Their priests were said to speak in strange tongues. Their rituals kept secret. Their people unyielding. The runes carved on the hilt of a sword found near a frozen lake said it best. "Beware the guardians of the white forest." And so, the Bjarmians weren't just feared because they were effective warriors. They were feared because they were different, too different. And to the Norse, difference was dangerous. Trade in silence. Yet, even amid this fear and bloodshed, something strange happened. The Vikings and the Bjarmians traded. Over time, neutral trade stations appeared, designed to prevent direct contact. These buildings had two separate entrances, a central fire pit, and no room for conversation. The system was called silent trade. One group would leave goods and walk away. The other would arrive later, assess the offer, leave something of equal value, and leave. Not a word spoken. No names exchanged. In 1989, treasure was found at a Bjarmian winter post. 1,700 silver coins from Arabia, Byzantium, and the Baltic. A clear sign of a vast, complex trade network. These savages, as the Norse once labeled them, were connected to global economies, far more advanced than their isolation suggested. But the Bjarmians never wrote sagas. They didn't commission sculptures or carve heroic tales in stone. Their memory survives only in fragments. Archaeological remains, hostile accounts, and the cold fear they left behind. A vanishing legacy. Eventually, the Viking Age ended. The northern trade routes changed. New powers rose, the Russians, the Swedes, and others, and slowly the Bjarmians faded from history. Some believe they were absorbed into neighboring tribes. Others think they moved deeper into the Arctic. Still others insist they simply vanished. But the evidence they left behind tells another story. A story not of defeat, but of quiet dominance. A people who stood their ground in the harshest of environments, who defied one of the most fearsome warrior cultures the world has ever known, and won. There are no great sagas about the Bjarmians, no legends of glory, no chants of their victories, just silence. And that silence, it still haunts the forests of the north.